The stars had turned red, not from the light they gave off, but from the blood spilled in their name. Every sector, every colony, every chunk of rock worth strip mining or terraforming had become a battleground. The galactic order, once hailed as a fragile but promising peace pact among alien races, collapsed like a rotting carcass when the Varnic Empire burned 7 planets in a single week and made the mistake of dragging Earth into it. That was 3 years ago now. There were no alliances, no diplomacy. Just war. Captain Rorden stood at the cracked viewport of the Maverick, Earth's last operational battle cruiser. The ship was more relic than weapon now. A Frankenstein hybrid of outdated Earth tech, stripped alien salvage, and good old human desperation. Every corner hummed with dying power. Cells and duct tape was practically structural, but it flew and it fired. That's all they needed. Below the hum of the engines, he could still hear it. That silence, the kind that only came after too many names had been deleted from the ships. Manifest. They started this run with 740 crew. They were down to 117. Roden's jaw tightened. He never liked giving speeches, but it was either speak now or let morale rot from the inside out. He pressed the comm panel. A dull click echoed through the halls. "All hands," he said, voice low, worn from too many funeral rites and too little sleep. "You already know the math. We don't have another jump drive. The Genesis fleet is gone. Earth command silent. We're all that's left." He let that settle. "But we're not dead, and we're not done." There was a pause. Somewhere in the lower decks, someone let out a shaky breath. Others listened. They always did when he spoke. Like this, like the words cost something. "This galaxy thinks we're weak, thinks humans are disposable." They laughed when Earth joined the council, mocked our short lives, our loud mouths, our primitive tools, and emotional recklessness. Rorden growled, "And now every last one of them is choking on their arrogance." He leaned forward, fists clenched on the comm panel. "So I'm not asking for hope. I'm asking for hate. Let it fuel you. Let it remind you of what they did to our colonies, to your families, to the men and women we buried in space. We don't fight for survival anymore. A beat, we fight for vengeance." He cut the comm. Minutes later, the Maverick burned a path through the remnants of the Tari fleet, 6 cruisers, 2 dreadnoughts, and a black-flagged Varnic slaughter barge. They were low on torpedoes, shields hanging on by a thread, and their AI had gone mute days ago. Didn't matter. They fired everything. What the Maverick lacked in tech, it made up for in rage. Human pilots didn't care about retreat paths. They rammed fighters into carrier decks. Engineers rerouted power manually with bare hands, even if it fried their skin. Medics patched up limbs with combat foam and steel rods. This was what the galaxy never understood. Humans didn't fight clean. They fought like cornered animals with nothing to lose. By the end of the skirmish, the battlefield was silent. Twisted hulls floated like rusted bones in space. Maverick limped through the debris, bleeding fuel and bodies, but alive. Down in the engine core, Lieutenant Price worked with trembling fingers, patching coolant lines with burned gloves. He hadn't slept in 39 hours. Half his squad was gone, but he kept going because giving up didn't feel like an option anymore. There was no Earth to return to, just war. A quiet voice spoke behind him. "You think we're winning?" Price didn't turn. "No," he said flatly. I think we're surviving, that's worse. The other man nodded and left, and that was the truth. The humans weren't heroes. In this war, they were the plague the galaxy didn't know it had unleashed. Not noble, not righteous, just angry, hurt, and relentless. Roden stood on the bridge again, staring out into the black. A single star pulsed. In the distance, not natural, a distress beacon. He exhaled. Chart the course. The beacon pulsed like a dying heartbeat, rhythmic, artificial, desperate. Captain Roden narrowed his eyes as the symbol etched across the signal repeated. On the flickering nav screen, not Varnek, not Tari, not anyone they recognized. What do you think? Asked Lieutenant Harrow, the only surviving officer on bridge rotation. He sat half sunken in the comms chair, one arm wrapped in bloodied bandage, the other tapping out a scan on the cracked console. Could be a trap. Roden didn't reply right away. He just stared into the vastness ahead. Out here past Sector Delta 17, there was nothing but dead systems and failed colonies. No refueling stations, no safe harbors. If someone was sending out a distress call here, they were either bait or desperate enough to mean it. He turned slowly. We're already ghosts, Harrow. They can't kill what's already been buried. Copy that, Harrow muttered grimly. Plotting course, the Maverick coasted through an asteroid field as silent as the grave. The forward shield sparked when a stone the size of a rifle cracked off the hull. They didn't bother rerouting power to repair it. Every joule of energy was reserved for weapons and life support. Everything else was expendable. Roden leaned against the cold railing above the command pit, his gaze distant. Can't sleep again, came a low voice behind him. He turned his head slightly and saw Gunner Chief Merrick, a man who had been with him since Hawking Station. Fell, his beard was patchy, burned on one side, one eye was bloodshot from a pressure burst weeks ago. Still standing, still fighting. Didn't think sleep was something we could afford anymore, Roden replied. Merrick snorted. Fair. I keep hearing the screaming when I close mine. Roden didn't respond to that. He didn't have to. They all heard the screaming, especially after Drift Spire. The day the Varnik poisoned the oxygen in a civilian archaeology and broadcasted it to every surviving Earth fleet. Children suffocating while the Varnak laughed. That was the turning point, not the tactics, not the ships, the fury. The Maverick finally reached the source of the beacon. What they found was worse than a trap, a broken ship, alien architecture, sleek and curving like bone grown over machinery, floated dead in space, half torn open like a carcass. Left too long in the sun, no power signature, no weapons active, but there were bodies, hundreds of them, and not Varnak. Roden zoomed in through the external optics, pale-skinned humanoids, tall and thin, symmetrical. Not a species he'd seen before. Their bodies floated free inside the cracked hull, frozen in agony. Life signs? He asked. Harrow shook his head. Faint one, maybe, but it's buried under 6 layers of radiation. If it's still alive, it won't be for long. Roden studied the ship again. Something was off. These weren't fighters, no armor plating, no weapon banks. The vessel was a civilian carrier. Why would anyone send a distress signal from a ship that's already dead? Harrow asked quietly. Merrick looked up from his console, face grim. Because someone wanted us to see it. Long silence followed. Roden turned. Prep the boarding team. I'm going over. The air inside the alien ship was thick. With decay, the suits filtered most of the toxins, but the stench of rot still crept through. The gravity was weak. Artificial systems flickering in and out, the alien corpses drifted like lost spirits caught in spiderwebs of broken wiring and shrapnel. Sergeant Weller, leading the three-man boarding squad, swept his rifle left to right. No movement, no defense systems. The deeper they moved, the worse it got. Entire corridors melted from plasma. Heat, signs of internal conflict. It wasn't an attack, it was an execution. They reached the center of the ship. Large chamber filled with rows of what looked like containment pods, sealed. Burned, shattered, Rodin crouched beside one and wiped the frost off the transparent shield. Inside was a child. Thin, four-limbed, large-eyed, alien. Yes, but afraid, frozen in terror. This wasn't a battle, he said. This was a purge. Weller cursed under his breath. Captain Harrow's voice crackled through the comms. You'll want to hear this. We decrypted part of the distress signal. Go ahead, it's not asking for help. It's a message repeated over and over in their tongue. We ran it through the translation algorithm and well, it says, they are coming, do not trust the alliance. The Varnick betrayed the truce. Rodin's jaw clenched. Timestamp: 20 hours ago. Weller stepped back from the pod, his face dark. Sir, this wasn't a trap, it's a goddamn warning. Rodin looked around at the wreckage. The scattered bodies, the burned children. This wasn't the enemy. These were victims, another race erased by the same monsters who torched Earth's colonies, who called humans emotional apes and weapons of chaos. Difference: humans hadn't lost yet. Back aboard the Maverick, Rodin stood before his remaining officers and senior techs. In the war room, a rusted chamber with one working projector and chairs pulled from the mess deck. He didn't bother with protocol. The Varnick are burning non-combatants. Again, this time an unknown species. Civilians, children. A murmur rippled through the room. No one was shocked, just angry. They're spreading through the outer sectors fast, wiping out anything that doesn't submit. The Tari, the Varnick, and half the Galactic Council are either allied or silent, cowards, traitors. What's the plan? Merrick asked bluntly. We make noise, Rodin said. We hit their comms, their supply routes. We make every corner of space echo with the name Maverick. Let them chase us. Let them fear us. We make sure every system knows humanity didn't die quietly. One of the engineers, a gaunt man named Bell, raised his hand. Sir, what if Earth is already gone? What if we're fighting for a graveyard? Rodin stepped closer, eyes burning. Then we make sure our enemies don't live long enough to dance on it. The next 3 weeks were hell. The Maverick hit 5 Varnick fuel convoys in a row. They took out a Tari comm station by flying into its blind spot and detonating a captured fusion core. They boarded a mobile weapons lab mid-flight and left it floating with its crew tied to the hull, dead from exposure. A warning to every passing warship. The galaxy started to notice reports of a ghost ship, the last Earth beast. The Maverick's shadow spread like wildfire. The Varnick triple patrols offered bounties, hired mercenaries. None came back, but every victory cost them. Price lost his right hand when a plasma coil ruptured. He kept working, one-handed, learning to rewrite systems by feel. Harrow collapsed from nerve strain. Weller was killed boarding a Varnick dreadnought, his body left behind, in a blast that took out the entire left wing. One by one the crew dwindled, but not a single one begged to leave. They were human, flawed, furious, feral, and they had nothing left but the fight. Eventually they found the signal. Buried Varnick outpost deep in the asteroid belt of an unregistered system. No reinforcements, no comms traffic. Just an isolated blip of energy pulsing. Beneath the rock, the kind of place you hide something important, Roan knew. Instinctively. This was their shot. They approached. Slow, silent, the Maverick drifted like a ghost, heat signatures suppressed. Weapons primed. Once they were within range, they fired. Every torpedo they had, not for damage. For chaos. The first salvo shattered the outer asteroid shell. The second blew a hole straight into the outpost's bay. They boarded within seconds. Inside, the base wasn't military, it was a lab. Dozens of alien scientists fled in panic, but they weren't Varnick, another race enslaved, forced to work. One of them, a trembling elder, fell to his knees as Rorden stormed in, rifle raised. "You are the human, the butcher," the alien croaked. "Where's the core, Rodden?" Snap. The alien didn't answer fast enough. Merrick stepped forward and slammed the butt of his gun into the alien's stomach. "Where's the fucksing core?" The alien coughed. Blood pointed to the sealed door. Rorden kicked it in. Inside was a data chamber humming with processors. Old Earth tech spliced with alien systems. He scanned the terminals, then froze. Schematics, dozens of them. Earth colonies, human defenses, civilian evacuation logs. This was it, proof the Varnick had coordinated the attacks with the Council, proof Earth was betrayed. From within, humanity hadn't just been invaded, it had been sold out by its allies. Rorden stared at the final scream, a personal log from a Varnick general. "Humans are not to be eliminated completely. A few must survive to suffer, to warn the others what happens when lesser species bite the hand that fed them." His fist shook. He downloaded everything, sent it up to Harrow, broadcasted it wide. No encryption, no secrecy. The galaxy needed to see. Let them all choke on their guilt. Above the lab, the Maverick took fire from 3 approaching ships. Varn armed and ready. Rorden looked at Merrick. "You ready?" The old soldier smiled through blood-stained teeth. "Born ready." They sprinted to the extraction port as the first blast rocked the station. Dust fell from the ceiling. Lights died. Sirens screamed. They made it aboard just as the Maverick spun and released its final payload. Makeshift bomb powered by their last fusion core. The explosion tore the outpost apart. The 3 enemy ships vanished in the fire. The Maverick limped away, half blind, half burning, but still breathing. In the days that followed, the data leak spread. Empires collapsed. Races turned on each other. Protests erupted. Council leaders fled. Varnick commanders were assassinated by their own slaves, and somewhere far out in the rim systems, a single name began to rise like a curse from the ashes. Maverick. Not a ship, not a man, a message. "You can kill humanity, but you'll never kill what it leaves behind." They were no longer hiding. The Maverick didn't need stealth now. It was a hammer, blunt, bloodied, and louder than ever. After the Varnick data core was leaked across galactic channels, chaos erupted. Systems that had pretended to be neutral, silent bystanders now had blood on their hands, and the people noticed. Revolts, mutinies, assassinations. Entire governments torn apart by the weight of their guilt. Rawdon stood in the war room staring at a dozen intercepted broadcasts from across the rim. One message from a planet called Core Avon replayed on loop. To the humans aboard the Maverick, we believed the lies. We watched Earth burn and thought you deserved it, but now we know we were complicit. You fight alone. But your fury woke us up. The Varn betrayed us all. You are not the monsters they are. He didn't smile. He didn't feel proud. It was too late for that. Every victory just reminded him of how many they'd lost. Earth was still silent. The colonies were still ash. The Maverick still had no allies with ships or fleets, just apologies and rebel uprisings too weak to matter yet. Anything from Sector 9? Rawdon asked. Quietly, Price leaned against the console, one arm wrapped in a pressure brace. One ship reported they saw another Earth vessel limping through the dark, but the signature faded before we could verify. Could be real, could be bait. Probably bait. Still chasing ghosts, sir? Price asked. Rawdon glanced at him. No. Just not ready to bury the last of us. The Maverick headed toward the Helix Rift, a dead zone of collapsing stars and gravitational anomalies that swallowed more ships than it spat out. Most species avoided it, not just because of the danger, but because the Varnak used it as a testing ground. Weapons, biotech, secret projects never meant to be seen. Rumor said that even the Tari feared the place. Rawdon didn't. He wanted what was inside. It was Harrow who found the signal, faint, buried under radiation storms, coded in a dead human encryption pattern. Not a trap. Not this time. Real. We found it, Harrow said, voice cracking through static. Earth tech, old military core broadcasting on a loop. Outrider protocol: survive, destroy, avenge. The phrase hit Roan like a punch to the chest. He hadn't heard it since Hawking Station. It was Earth's black ops code, used only when every official chain of command had collapsed. It meant someone out there had survived. They reached the signal within 20 hours. The approach nearly tore the Maverick apart. Rogue grav waves slammed the hull and the nav systems bled. Errors. Merrick had to reroute manual controls to the old gunnery AI, which sputtered half the time like it had dementia, but it worked. And then they saw it, a ship, small, ugly, built for function, not looks, barely bigger than a gunboat. But it was. Earth aid scars across its hull, burns from Varnak plasma. It was still alive. ID code matches the Grim Echo, Harrow said, staring in disbelief. Recon ship. It vanished 2 years ago, declared KIA. Guess someone forgot to die, Price muttered. Rawdon stood. Open a channel. The comm hissed, then a voice, low, ragged and male, came through. This is Lieutenant Beck of the Grim Echo. If you're reading this, you're either the enemy or the ghost ship I've been hoping to hear from. Rawdon stepped forward. This is Captain Rawdon, Maverick, Earth Fleet. A pause, static, then a heavy exhale. I thought we were the last. You're not. They boarded the Grim Echo cautiously. Its crew was down to 7. Malnourished, half-mad, held together with wire and willpower. One man had a metal shard fused to his spine. Another had a melted eye replaced with an old surveillance lens. Beck, their commander, was barely recognizable. As human, skin pale, eyes sunken, he wore the old Earth uniform like it was sacred cloth, blackened with soot and dried blood. We were on recon when they hit Edens. Reach, Beck said, voice hollow. They came out of nowhere, ripped the sky apart. Council fleets turned there backs. You know the rest, we know more. Now, Roden replied, we've been showing the galaxy what their silence cost. Beck laughed bitterly. They didn't care when it was us, now they're scared it might be them next. Roden nodded. Exactly. The two ships formed a plan. The Maverick would draw out the Varnak elite, taunt them with broadcasts, leaks, attacks on sacred worlds, make them angry, make them rash. The Grim Echo would sneak through their exposed underbelly, track the location of the Prime Core, the central AI node that coordinated Varnak fleet movements. If they took it out, the Varnak fleets would lose synchronicity, panic, confusion, open slaughter. The plan wasn't clean, but war never is. The bait began with a transmission sent directly into Varnak diplomatic lines. This is the Maverick, the ghost you couldn't kill. We are coming for your Prime Core, and when we find it, we will burn your name from the stars. The response was instant. Within hours, 12 Varnak warships were hunting them across 3 systems. Their arrogance blinded them. They didn't suspect, though, Grim Echo slipping behind their lines through a minefield of dead colonies and wreckage. Beck moved like a phantom, silent, cold, ruthless. He didn't run, he stalked, and eventually he found it. The Prime Core was hidden beneath a planet called Valto, orbiting a dead sun, a fortress built into the crust. Not just a command center, a palace of arrogance, gold-trimmed spires, statues of Varnak warlords, thousands of lives buried beneath it. Figures they'd put their brain under a monument, Beck said, watching from orbit. Arrogant bastards. He sent the coordinates. Roden studied them, memorized every detail. This is it, he said. Merrick nodded. Suicide mission always. They jumped it. Hot. The Maverick broke into Veil talk. Orbit like a meteor. No stealth, no hesitation. Cannons lit up the sky. Fighters launched, turrets screamed, but they didn't run. They rammed the upper defense platform head-on. The explosion was visible from orbit. Roden led the boarding party himself down into the crust, through blood-slick corridors, past burning shrines and dying Varnak guards. They weren't there to negotiate. They weren't there to survive. Just to end it. They reached the core chamber after 20 minutes of fighting. The AI sat in a massive throne of wires and circuits, a living brain machine, humming with power, alien tech spliced with human code stolen from the early days of the invasion. The Varnak had used Earth's innovation to enslave others. Roden approached the console, plasma rifle in one hand. The AI spoke. Human, you are not logical. This course ends in death, yours and others. You finally understand us, Roden said. He pulled the trigger. The core screamed. Not in sound, in systems. Across the galaxy, Varnak ships began to stutter, lose formation, misfire, drift. Their power was precision, coordination. Now it was chaos. The Grim Echo broadcast the footage, live, raw, brutal. The last humans storming the fortress, killing the core, defying extinction. Races once too scared to act rose up in riots. Fleets mutinied. Slave races turned on their masters. It wasn't just war now, it was revenge. Maverick never left Veil talk. They held the planet as long as they could. Repelled wave after wave of counter assaults, lost more lives, bled more steel, but they never gave it back. By the time Varnak reinforcements arrived, the planet's core was broken. The AI. Corrupted, the human virus had done its work. The Varnak war engine sputtered, and the galaxy watched as their empire began to crumble. Rorden stood atop the ruined spire. Helmet cracked, bleeding from a dozen wounds. He looked up at the sky, saw the Varnak ships circling, waiting for the end. Behind him, only 23 crew were left. Merrick was gone, Price too. He didn't care because somewhere out there, a 100 worlds had just found courage, and humanity had done what no one else dared. He raised his rifle one last time, not in fear, in defiance. Let them come. Sky above Vale Talk was a bruised canvas, torn between darkness and flame. Rorden sat in the ruins of the comms tower, back pressed against scorched steel. Smoke curled from the shattered panels around him. A piece of shrapnel was buried just under his ribs. Every breath rattled like a dying engine. But he wasn't dead, not yet. Below him, the last of the Maverick's crew held the inner courtyard. No cover, no medics. Barely any ammunition left. 23 souls who had survived everything from atmospheric implosions to betrayal by Earth's own allies, and now they waited not for rescue but for the final wave. They're circling again, Harrow said, crouching behind a collapsed column. Rifle across his lap, his left eye was swollen shut. Blood crusted along his temple, but his hands didn't shake. Looks like another 5 ships in low orbit, maybe more behind. Roan nodded slightly, eyes locked on the horizon. They're stalling. Harrow glanced over. Why, we're cornered, low on everything. Half of us can't walk. What the hell are they waiting for? Roden's voice was steady. Because they're scared. Harrow let out a bitter laugh. Us, we're ghosts with rifles. They've got cruisers and a whole damn empire behind them, and it still was enough. Rorden muttered. The Varnak never expected Earth to make it this far. They thought the last ship would vanish in silence. They thought the Prime Corps was invincible. But humans didn't fight by the rules. They didn't break when logic said to. They broke the rules instead. Roden closed his eyes for a moment, hearing the wind howl through the ruins. In that silence, the ghosts of every lost soul whispered behind his ears. The civilians at Eden's Reach, the crew of Hawking Station, the children in cryopods torn open mid-jump, gasping for air that never came. This war was never about winning, it was about not forgetting. An alarm crackled to life in what remained of the command post. Low frequency, distorted like the bass itself was choking on its own breath. Then a voice, male, deep, unfamiliar, but definitely human. This is the Wraithorn Earthfleet Black Signal. We're picking up your IFFF. Rorden's heart stopped for half a second. He grabbed the comm mic from the rubble and pressed the cracked transmit button. Repeat your call sign. Wraithorn long-range strike frigate. Escaped through the Elysian fold during the collapse. Been running dark for 19 months, more. Static. Picked up your broadcast, saw the core fall, couldn't believe it. Didn't want to. Roden looked at Harrow, whose one good eye was wide. There were survivors, not just his crew, not just the Grim Echo. More, we've got 7 ships with us. Old, patched up, but they burn. You're not alone anymore, Maverick. Roden couldn't speak for a moment. His throat tightened, not with hope, that was too fragile, but with something harder. Vindication. They weren't the last, and now they had fire. 36 hours later, the Wraith fleet dropped out of slip space like falling thunder. 7 ships earthed. Designant, modified with stolen alien Tech. Their hulls were scorched. Irregular, ugly, nothing like the gleaming symmetry of council vessels. But they moved with purpose. The lead ship, the Wraithorn itself, launched a barrage at the Varnak. Blockade above before even transmitting a greeting, no warnings, no negotiations. Just fire. The sky lit up. Roden stood on the ruined platform, watching the battle unfold in low orbit. He didn't smile, but something in his chest unclenched. They came, Harrow whispered beside him. Of course they did, Roden said. We taught them to. The Varnak were caught off guard. They still believed they held superiority. But the destruction of the Prime Corps had done more than disrupt tactics. It had shattered confidence. Their fleets began to drift. Captains contradicting one another, units firing out of sync. Earth's fleet moved like predators, not orderly but lethal. Their chaos. The Wraithorn flanked wide while two smaller craft strafed the nearest Varnak destroyer with magnetic rail cannons designed for asteroid drilling. It tore through shielding like paper. One by one the enemy ships fell. On the surface, the remaining Maverick crew didn't wait for cleanup. They moved through the corridors of the Varnak palace, sector by sector, gunning down stragglers, leaving no survivors. The time for prisoners had long passed. This was not a war of diplomacy anymore. This was retribution. In one of the lower vaults they found what the Varnak had really been hiding. Human archives, not battle logs, not schematics. People. Over 100 human prisoners, cryofrozen, caged in stasis pods, some dating back over 2 years. Civilians, scientists, military personnel abducted, experimented on, tortured. Roden stood at the main terminal, staring at the data logs, organ catalogs, neural maps, translation attempts, crossbreeding failures. Every file screamed one message: you are not species, you are sample. We were livestock to them, Harrow whispered. An NBSP, test subjects. No, Roden said coldly. We were the control group, the baseline, the thing they didn't understand. He looked at the rows of pods, faces frozen in sleep, unaware of what had happened. But now they'll learn. The liberation of Veil Talk sent shock waves through every star system within range. It was no longer just a myth. The Maverick was real. Earth survivors were not only alive but fighting back, winning, and with proof of human prisoners. The propaganda of the Varnak regime began to unravel. Their claims of a righteous war, of pacifying a volatile species, collapsed in the face of torture, records, breeding experiments, and forced cryo-abductions. Even their allies faltered. The Tari government declared neutrality within. The weak, other species, once cowed, once willing to play along for survival, began to riot in their home systems. And, above it all, the name of Maverick echoed, a legend, a warning, and a promise. In orbit, the survivors gathered. Roden stepped aboard the Wraithorn for the first time. The air stale, the lighting dim, but the atmosphere heavy with purpose. Its captain, a grizzled man named Traz, saluted with his left hand. His right was a prosthetic made from Varnak alloy and what looked like bone. We thought we were the last, Traz said. So did we. Traz offered a tired smile. What now? Roden didn't hesitate. Now we build the knife. In the weeks that followed, the surviving Earthships turned Veil Talk into a fortress. They didn't ask for permission. They tore down every Varnak monument, replaced it with scrap forged bunkers and turret emplacements. Converted the main palace into a command center. They stripped alien tech, hacked it, twisted it into new forms, Earth weapons fused with stolen power cores. They weren't building an army, they were building a warning. The age of mercy was over. One night Roden stood alone at the outer balcony, overlooking the site where human prisoners had been buried alive. Dozens of recovered stasis pods were now functional and waking up. Among them was a boy, no older than 16, curled in the fetal position as the cryoist evaporated around him. He blinked up at Roden with wide, frightened eyes. "Is it over?" he asked. Roden stared down at him. "No," he said, "it's just beginning." They called themselves the Broken Legion, not Earth Command, not the United Planetary Defense. That was all dead. This wasn't a rebirth, it was a reckoning. They didn't plan on rebuilding the old world, they planned on burning the enemies to the ground. First, every crew member of the Maverick, the Wraithorn, and the surviving fleet swore an oath. No flags, no politics, no second chances for traitors. You either stood with the Broken Legion or you stood in their way. The Broken Legion didn't wait. They had no political channels to navigate, no planetary councils to impress, no home world to report to. They had fire, they had fury, and now for the first time they had numbers from the ashes of vile talk. They built the war machine Earth should have fielded before its betrayal, crude, vicious, and fast, because speed mattered more than beauty. Duct-taped holes reinforced with Varnic alloy, ship cores fueled by black market, gravium siphoned from dead planets, plasma cannons retrofitted with alien components that Earth engineers would have called madness. It worked because war didn't care if the tools were ugly. Roden stood inside what used to be a Varnic war hall. The ceiling still bore the claw-marked sigil of their wretched empire. Now jagged steel banners hung from the beams, painted by hand with crude black paint, the Legion's mark and X carved through a broken circle. The symbol wasn't meant to inspire, it was a threat, a shattered system. Crossed out, target confirmed, said Harrow from across the strategy table. Carthus 12, mid-tier supply world, not too well defended, but not so soft it'll look like cowardice. Roden grunted. Civilian population minimal, mostly Varnic military, slave-worn labor, and rotational officers. No sign of prisoners, but they've got fuel silos and dry docks for cruisers. Destroy it and we put a hole in their core roots. He looked at the others in the room. Traz, Merrick's replacement, a hard-faced woman named Vex, who used to be a Tari slave. 3 other ex-crew captains who'd abandoned their governments to fight with the humans, not because they cared about Earth, but because the humans had shown what real resistance looked like. "You want to make a statement?" Roden said, voice quiet, rough. "We glass it. Not just the base, all of it. Leave the crater as a scar." One of the alien captains shifted uncomfortably. "That'll kill everyone." "Good." A silence hung in the air like static. Harrow didn't flinch, neither did Vex. They understood this wasn't a mission of liberation anymore. It wasn't even vengeance, it was a racer. The Wraithorn dropped into Carthus 12's orbit like a blade stabbing the sky. No warning, no communication, no codes. The Varnac defense grid tried to power up. Failed. The Maverick's stolen jammers had already torn through the systems. Neural net, the planetary shield, flickered, caught midrise like a dead Man trying to stand, too late, rail gun. Bursts tore into the atmosphere, fire. Rain down, precision strikes on the fuel silos, the dry docks, the command towers, each hit ruptured with thunder. From orbit, Carthus 12 lit up like the surface of a sun, the first wave of Legion dropships followed fast, storming the skeletons of what used to be the command district. Roden led the first squad himself, boots slamming onto scorched concrete. The Varnak tried to fight, they didn't last, earth drained. Soldiers didn't move like the others. They didn't wait for orders, didn't hesitate for cover. They swarmed, burned, strangled commanders with fuel lines. One Marine ran out of ammo and beat a Varnak officer to death with his helmet. By hour 2, resistance collapsed. By hour 6, Chorus 12 was silent. Black smoke curled toward orbit, thick and greasy, the kind that clings to memory like blood on hands. They broadcast the footage across every unaligned system. The images weren't cleaned up, no filters, no heroic music. Just raw feed, explosions, screaming. Shattered towers, Varnak corpses stacked like broken machines. A banner with the Legion's mark planted in the heart of their once untouchable military sector, and a single sentence scrolled beneath it in 3 universal languages: we do not forgive. Reaction was instant and messy. Half the galaxy panicked. Council worlds doubled patrols around their embassies. Propaganda flared, calling humans savages, outlaws, terrorists, but it was too late. The illusion was gone. The Varnak had promised control, safety, through strength, that their rule, though harsh, was necessary. But now the galaxy had proof, a species that defied that control, one that wasn't just surviving, one that was hunting back on Vilto. The prisoners from the frozen pods were waking up one by one. Rorden stood beside one of the recovery teams as a tall, older man staggered from his cryotube, coughing up frost and bile. His skin was pale, Earth military. Tattoos along one arm, eyes full of confusion and rage. He looked at Roan, lips trembling. Where am I? Roden didn't soften, didn't lie. Varnak territory, he said. Your ship was taken. You were frozen for testing. The man's fists clenched. How long? 2 years. The man stared, then something hardened in his expression. Is Earth still standing? Roden hesitated. Maybe. We haven't heard anything since the fall, but we're not dead. Not anymore. The man looked around, saw the other soldiers, the flags, the scars. This isn't Earth Command, he said. Slowly, Warden nodded. No, this is the Broken Legion. A pause, then the man straightened, pain and confusion pushed aside like old wounds. Where do I sign? The growth was exponential. For every planet they hit, 2 more joined them. Not governments, not ships with laws and politics and votes, but people. Survivors, deserters, slaves, scavengers, broken soldiers, disillusioned aliens. Each one with a reason to hate the Varnak, each one with nothing to lose. The Legion became something terrifying. Not because of its numbers, but because it didn't negotiate, it didn't hold talks, it didn't pretend there would be peace when the war ended. The Maverick, now held in low orbit for repair, became a shrine not of hope, but of fire. Pilgrims came just to see the hull, the burn marks, the scars, the black-etched names of the original crew scratched into its side. The last ship from Earth, still bleeding, still dangerous. Traz met Rorden at the comm tower one night. A bottle of stolen Tari liquor in one Hand, he didn't offer it. He knew Roden didn't drink anymore. How long can we keep this up? Traz asked, watching the stars above flicker through clouded glass. We're hitting supply lines bases, but they'll adapt. Even scared, the Varnik are still stronger. Roden didn't answer immediately. He ran a hand over his face, felt the stubble and the grime and the exhaustion. That had become part of him. We're not fighting to win a territory war, he said. We're not claiming planets. We're not building nations. Trask frowned. Then what the hell are we doing? Roden turned. We're ending theirs. Next target, Zavari system, a Varnik breeding hub, a place they manufactured soldiers not born, bred in tubes, designed, grown fast, and discarded even faster, billions of them raised to kill. Without question, Roden's plan was simple. Erase it. The attack came without warning. A fleet of 11 Legion ships dropped out of warp just above the atmosphere. The planet's defenses were brutal: automated turrets, plasma grids, drone swarms, but the Legion had changed too. Beck's Grim Echo was now a stealth missile platform, launching high-yield bunker busters from behind sensor-cloaked asteroids. Vex led an infiltration team through the outer layers of the orbital ring and detonated the life support. By the time the first Varnik commander realized what was happening, the core reactors were destabilized. The planet ruptured from the inside. Not clean, not quick, but thorough. The footage once again was shared. No message this time, just the silence of space where an empire's most sacred installation used to be. Back in the Legion's growing fleet, newer recruits began carving names into the side of their hulls. Not of enemies, of losses, mothers, wives, sons, crewmates, entire cities. Roden walked through one of the forward hangars and saw them, the faces painted on steel walls, the symbols drawn in dried blood, the names etched by hands that would rather carve than cry. One phrase was repeated across 20 holes in 20 languages. They started it, will finish it. But not all watched in silence. Far across the spiral arm, a new signal broke into Legion territory, encrypted. Old Earth code, ancient, almost prehistoric. Harrow cracked it in 30 minutes. His face went pale. What is it? Warden asked. Harrow handed him the pad. Roden read it once, twice. 3 words. Earth is burning, Earth is burning. The words hung in the war room like a corpse, silent, heavy, and impossible to ignore. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the hum of the machinery seemed to hold its breath. Roden stood at the center, fingers clenched so tight the data pad cracked. In his grip, the signal had come in on an old Earth encryption protocol that hadn't been used since before the invasion, the kind only Black Ops recon units knew, units that had supposedly died during the fall. The message contained no image, no voice, just those 3 words followed by a set of coordinates buried in the Sol system. Could be fake, Harrow said, his voice low, almost unwilling to break the moment. Could be Varnik psychological warfare. They know what Earth means to us. Doesn't matter, Roden said finally, eyes locked on the screen. If there's even a chance it's real, we're going back. A murmur rippled through the room. No one had uttered that sentence since the collapse. Earth wasn't a symbol, it was a grave. To go back wasn't about hope, it was about truth and possibly revenge. The Maverick led the way. Repairs were Incomplete, half its internal systems were jewelry rigged with alien scraps and broken relays, but it flew, that was all Rawdon needed. The Legion fleet followed, 18 ships strong now. Frankenstein collection of former Earth. Cruisers, Tari defectors, rogue slave skiffs, and hybrid vessels built in the dust of ruined colonies. No flags, no unity, just one goal, a single jump. Straight into Saul. Harrow sat beside him in the command chair, silent as the ship's AI cycled through hyperspace. Pre-launch. No one talked during this prep, not anymore. Rawdon checked the mission data again. He already knew it by heart. 3 pulse signatures in low Earth orbit, 1 marked as a derelict, 1 as a Varnak cruiser, the 3rd unknown. The surface radio silent, no lights from the cities, no satellites responding. Just static. I need eyes on the ground the second we hit vacuum, Rawdon said. Harrow nodded. You think anyone's left? I don't care. Rawdon said, if they touched Earth again. We turned the stars black. The jump nearly tore them apart. Space around Earth wasn't normal anymore. The gravity field was wrong. Twisted, radiation fluctuated every few seconds like heartbeat palpitations. Something had happened here, something big. When the Maverick dropped out of slip, it met the silence of a graveyard. The Varnak ship floated dead, scorched from prow to engines. Massive holes chewed through its midsection like it had been torn from the inside. The derelict, an old Earth carrier, the Resolute, still recognizable despite the wounds. Its hull was open to space. Half melted, its engines long dead, no life signs, but the 3rd signal, the unknown one that was still active, low orbit, cloaked in a shell of debris. Power levels faint but unmistakable. Human, scan it, Rawdon snapped. Now. Harrow worked fast. It's hours. Pre-fall tech modified, transmitting on blackout burst frequency every 30 seconds. Anyone on board? Something's keeping the lights on. That's all I can confirm. Rawdon didn't wait. He locked a boarding team together, himself, Vex, 2 Marines from the Wraithorn, and 1 of the Cryorovid survivors from Vale. Talk. A quiet man named Haven who hadn't said 10 words since waking up. The Maverick launched them within the hour. The docking was rough. The unknown ship had no running lights, no docking beacons, no response. They latched on manually and breached the outer hatch with cutters and a plasma lance. Inside, the air stank of rust and ozone. The walls pulsed faintly with backup power. There were signs of recent life. Footprints, food packets scorched. Consoles, but no crew. As they moved deeper into the core, the ship revealed its truth. It wasn't a warship, it was a vault. Rows of stasis pods lined the lower decks, human bodies inside, alive but frozen, all civilians, no military, no political identifiers, just people. Handwritten note was taped to the wall near the cryo control panel. 4 words, faded, scrolled in desperation. They're coming, hide them. Rawdon didn't speak. He looked at Haven, whose expression hadn't changed until now. His eyes went wide. His mouth twitched. I know this place. Haven whispered, you've been here before. No, he said, pointing to a scorched insignia on the bulkhead. I built it. Back on the Maverick, Haven sat in the medical bay, face pale, hands trembling. They called it Project Burrow, he said. Classified contingency, hidden under the pretense of asteroid mining. We prepped it before the fall in case Earth was Lost a last vault, emergency cryo. We only had time to fill 1/4 of the capacity. Roden folded his arms. You're saying those are Earth's last civilians? Some of them haven't nodded. We were supposed to protect the gene pool. Scientists, engineers, mothers, children, I don't know who made it in. And the Varnek, they found it having whispered, but they didn't destroy it. They tried to infect it. Something went wrong. Looks like the AI self-sealed. Harrow entered then, holding a data pad. You'll want to see this. He handed it to Roden. Surveillance pulled from the derelict. The Resolute 4 weeks ago. Roden watched. The screen lit up with security footage of Varnek squad, elite, armed, efficient, boarding the ship, searching. Then something happened. One of them started screaming. Something inside the hull tore through them, not gunfire. Something organic, fast, unnatural. Then the feed went black. What the hell was that? Roden growled. Harrow said nothing, just turned the data pad and showed the timestamp. 22 hours ago, whatever had killed the Varnek was still here, and it wasn't human. That night Roden stood at the viewport. Earth below him burned. Broken, silent. From orbit it looked like a rotting eye, scars across continents. Ash clouds still choking the atmosphere. No city lights, no satellites, just silence. But under all that, life. Somewhere in that ruin, people had survived, buried, hiding, crawling beneath the bones of what was once there. Home. Roden knew what had to happen next. Not a raid, not a hit and run. They were going down. He assembled the team at dawn. Planetfall would be fast, hard and ugly. No confirmation of friendlies, no uplink from Earth. Command, no beacon from any stronghold. This wasn't a rescue mission. This was reclamation. Anyone not ready to die, Roden said. To the hangar deck full of black armored Legion troops, stay on the ship. No one moved. He smirked grimly. Let's go home. The dropship ripped through the upper atmosphere, shields screaming. Under the strain, ash clogged the air. Static roared through the comms. Earth was no longer Earth. It was something feral now, abandoned, unforgiving. The ship landed in what used to be North America, somewhere near old New Chicago. The city was gone. Craters stretched for miles. Steel bones of skyscrapers jutted from the ground like broken teeth. Roden stepped out onto blackened soil. The wind howled. Silence answered. They moved in a spread pattern, sweeping ruins, scanning every heat trace, every movement. And then they heard it. Not a voice, not a machine, something worse, a growl. Low, wet, guttural. It came from beneath the streets. Haven's voice came over comms. We triggered something. Then the ground exploded. They weren't Varnek. They weren't human. They were made. Twisted, stretched human skeletons. Inside alien flesh. Faces where they shouldn't be. Eyes that flickered in random patterns. Joints reversed. Blood steaming. Roden opened fire. The rest followed. The monsters moved fast. Too fast. Some walked, some slithered. One of them burst into flame when hit and kept coming. Whatever had been left behind on Earth had evolved, mutated, weaponized. The fight wasn't a battle. It was a massacre. The Legion fought like demons. But even they weren't prepared for this. One squad went silent. Another screamed about the shadows moving on their own. One soldier tried to reload and found his hand missing, bitten clean off, and through it all the whispers, voices that weren't real. Go back, go back, go back. They pulled out before the last Dropship was overrun, 14 dead, 7 wounded, 2 missing, as the Maverick escaped back into orbit. Earth fell silent again, burning, breathing, watching, and something down there waited, back in the war room. No one spoke. Finally, Roden stood. "We can't save Earth," he said. Silence deepened, "but we can avenge it." Roden didn't speak for 3 days after the Earth drop. He sat alone in the Maverick's war chamber, staring at the tactical feed of the Sol system. Every 5 minutes, the projection updated. Planetary scans, gravitational anomalies, energy flickers, coded pings from the Cryova still in orbit, but no matter how much data scrolled across the screen, it couldn't drown out what he saw down there. Earth wasn't just ruined, it had been warped. Whatever had bred in its bones after the fall, it wasn't natural, not even Varnak made. It was something else, something that whispered from behind dead buildings and torn sky, monsters made of memory, ghosts with claws. And yet, it wasn't the abominations that shook Roden, it was the feeling in his gut that Earth, his Earth, was already gone, not destroyed, not conquered. Something older had taken it. Something that didn't care about fleets or flags. And now the galaxy had nowhere left to hide. Traz was the first to speak it aloud. Days later, during the emergency council, aboard the Wraithorn. That wasn't Varnak. He stood by the projection table, jaw clenched, finger tapping the distorted footage from the ground assault, the creatures, the distortion, the impossible speeds and psychic pressure. Varnak technology is brutal, but it's not this. This is something they woke up, something they couldn't control. And now it's loose, Harrow added grimly. Not just on Earth, that mutation, the screamers, the neural interference. We're seeing fragments show up in at least 3 outer sectors. It's spreading fast. Vex leaned forward. Boepin. Worse, Roden said, voice low. Legacy tech. The room fell silent. What do you mean? Traz asked. Roden pointed to the feed. That mutation wasn't random. That kind of neural bleed, that dissonance. We had early research on things like that, black projects buried under Mars, wiped during the pre-fall purges. You're saying humans built that? No. Roden said, I'm saying someone built it. With us in mind. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source, Beck from the Grim Echo. His team recovered a fragment of hard-coded Varnak logs from a derelict orbiting a dead moon in Varnak. Sector 7, the logs were corrupt, fragmented, written in a hybrid language. But Harrow translated enough of it. The architects are watching. The test subject designation H has reached acceptable thresholds of rage response. Let them burn, let them suffer. Let them become. Silence followed. Harrow looked up. Pale. Designation H is us. They weren't fighting the Varnak anymore, not really. The Varnak were just the dogs, enforcers, enslavers, but they weren't the ones pulling the strings. Somewhere deeper in the galactic dark, something else existed. The ones who watched, the ones who let the war happen, the architects. What do we know? Roden asked Beck. Harrow and Vex were there, so was Traz. So were a few alien allies now fully integrated into the broken legion. Former slaves, former cowards now killers. Harrow flipped open a feed of ancient star maps, declassified scans from early Earth deep space probes. Old myths from Tari records speak of star makers, not gods, not deities. Engineers, biological terraformers. Species designers, not organic. Machine-based, but older than even. Varnic records, Traz scoffed, that's ancient garbage, children's stories. No, Harrow said, Varnic have been in communication with someone else. We found the transmission nodes on Earth, buried deep in the crust, not Varnic. Code older, more advanced, the Varnic weren't just wiping us out. They were shaping us, Roden finished. No one laughed, the architects hadn't come to destroy humanity, they'd come to push it, to provoke it, to see what happened when a primitive, emotional, volatile species was torn apart and left to claw its way back with bloodied fingers. They wanted to see what we'd become. And now they had their answer. What do you want to do? Traz asked Roden later as they sat in the ruined observation bay of the Maverick. Roden didn't answer for a long time. Then I want to find them. Traz raised an eyebrow. And then what? Roden's jaw flexed. I want to make them afraid. The path forward wasn't easy. There were no maps to the architects, no addresses, no diplomatic frequencies, just fragments, patterns, ruins. But the galaxy was full of old bones, ghost stations floating in deep space, dead planets littered with tech too advanced for the species that had once lived. There, the Broken Legion began hunting them. They stopped hitting Varnic supply lines. They started hitting sites, the forbidden zones, places that even the most brutal empires refused to touch. The red worlds, the silence arcs, places that made machines bleed data, and ships refused to jump. Everywhere they went, they found the same thing: monuments to experiments, species twisted by purpose, emotions harvested like fuel. In one station they found a chamber full of crying echoes, sounds that repeated endlessly, looped through old bone circuitry, human voices, screams. Beck burned the station down personally. And then they found Hollow Frame. It wasn't a planet, it wasn't a ship, it was something in between, a construct the size of a moon, orbiting nothing, suspended in void. No stars, no systems, just black. No gravity wells, no signals, no energy signatures until the Wraithorn got close. Then it spoke, not in words, in memories. Roden dropped to his knees the second the proximity warning blared. So did Traz, so did 36 crew across the fleet. They saw home, the fall there, families dying, the betrayal over and over. The pain loops sharpened. The architects weren't hiding, they were studying. It took every ounce of energy. The Maverick had to blast through the frame's outer shell, a suicide run. They lost 2 ships, a third went silent mid-jump and never came back. But Roden's team made it in. What they found wasn't a machine, it was a mausoleum. Billions of neural recordings, entire civilization stored as software, frozen in pain loops, genetic templates preserved in cages, battle simulations running in real time where humans were always the test subjects, always the prey. One chamber held a simulation labeled Earth Cycle 4R17, collapse through rage, rebirth through retaliation, result 7.2%, 2% chance of universal disruption. Outcome acceptable. Harrow whispered, they've been killing us in loops and learning every time. Roden said they found the central core, buried in the heart of Hollow Frame, not guarded, not sealed, waiting. It pulsed like a heart, not with blood, with intention. As Roden approached, the room flickered. A presence filled it, not a voice, in emotion, curiosity. You came farther than most, the architect present said, pressing into his skull like boiling pressure. You killed your gods, you became the flame. You are the most dangerous thing we've made. Rodin bared his teeth. We didn't ask to be made. All life is shaped. You are shaped by loss. That makes you pure. You will burn this galaxy. You will reshape it in your image. We thank you for your sacrifice. Rodin didn't blink, then returned the favor. He pressed the detonator. Broken Legion detonated hollow frame in a burst of stolen antimatter. The blast lit up the void. The frame cracked like glass under fire, but the war wasn't over. It was just becoming clear. The enemy wasn't the Varnak. It wasn't even the architects. It was the design. The idea that any species could be measured, programmed, broken, and rebuilt. Humanity had been the final experiment. Now it was the error, and like any good error, it refused to go away quietly. Back aboard the Maverick, Harrow limped through the recovery deck, blood still drying from his ears. He found Rodin standing by the observation bay again. This time the stars were red. What now? Harrow asked. Rodin looked up. There are more of them, more frames. No more like us, Rodin said. We're not the only experiment, not the only broken thing trying to remember its name. Harrow frowned. Then what are we doing? Rodin didn't blink. We're lighting the match. They called it the signal storm. It began 13 days after Hollow Frame was destroyed across hundreds of systems. From the rim to the core, every long-range relay began to scream. Not words, not languages, frequencies, bursts of code pulsing, overlapping, thousands of them, as if 100 ancient machines had started speaking at once. Overlapping thoughts, bleeding instructions. Every starfaring race heard it. Every empire, every backwater mining crew, every drifting pirate vessel. No one was spared. Civilian ships imploded. Men jump. Planetary AIS self-erased. Children in high-sensitivity neural schools had seizures in unison and painted the same symbol on the walls. With their blood, an eye split open. Crying flame. The architects had awoken, and they were afraid. Rodin stood in the central chamber of the Maverick, its hull patched again with stolen alloy and raw defiance. Before him, projected across the table, was a list of new targets, dozens of them, not ships, not cities, frames. They were everywhere now, hidden in the crusts of dead planets, floating inside rogue stars cloaked in black holes. Architects hadn't built one monument to their experiment. They'd built an entire pantheon. It's a trap, Traz said flatly. Studying the list, they want us to chase them, spread ourselves thin, burn out before we reach the end. Good, Rodin replied, voice like gravel. Let them feel what we felt, exhausted, hunted, cornered. Vex stepped forward. We can't hit all of them, not fast enough. We don't need to, Harrow said, limping into the room, his synthetic leg clanking with every step. We hit the one that screams the loudest. Make the rest bleed from the noise. Rodin turned to him. Harrow held up a pad, eyes grim. There's one deep void. Sector uncharted. No gravity wells, no systems, just one anomaly, recorded once during Prefall probe missions, labeled idle on point. You want the center of the maze. He pointed at the blinking red dot. That's it. It took 9 days to prepare, not to fuel ships, not to calculate jumps, but to say goodbye. They all knew it. This wasn't a battle They expected to return from. The Legion had grown, 43 ships strong, crewed by outcasts, broken warriors, defectors, and monsters with Earth scars in their minds, and they all volunteered, every one of them, even the frozen civilians from Project Burrow. Once reawakened, took arms or worked salvage crews they didn't ask for. Survival, but they would earn it. No surrender, no speeches, just war. Roden gave one final command before they jumped. Whatever happens, burn the sky behind us. Idleland Point wasn't real space, it was memory wrapped in gravity. As the fleet jumped in, stars twisted, light bent sideways, and engines glitched mid-fire. Ships passed through things that shouldn't exist, fragments of time, loops of screams, visions of other worlds lost to war. Then the core appeared. It wasn't a planet, not even a structure, it was a wound in space. Like someone had stabbed the universe, and it hadn't stopped bleeding. From within it they spoke, not with voices, but with regret. You were not meant to come this far. Roden stared through the observation bay as the architect presence crawled into every ship, every mind. You were shaped, but now you are wild. We built cages of sorrow, you chewed through the bars. We broke your game, Roden said. Now we're ending the players. If you kill us, you unravel the code. You tear the roots from the tree. Good. You will become what we feared. Roden bared his teeth. We already did. The fight didn't begin with weapons. Frames reacted, reality buckled, ships lost gravity, crew screamed as their minds were dragged into memory spirals, forced to relive their worst losses, their betrayals, their moments of surrender. One pilot wept as he crashed into the hull of a Legion ship, murmuring the name of a son he hadn't seen since the fall. One medic locked herself in a stasis pod and detonated it because she saw her sister's face staring back from the shadows. It wasn't just battle, it was a psychological apocalypse, but the humans pushed back. They'd already lived in hell, and they were still standing. Harrow rerouted navigation through auditory loops. Legion soldiers began wearing neural blockers made from Varnic bone. One ship blasted white noise across space so loud it broke through the architect field, long enough for a 3-ship breach team to land on the core's surface. Roden led the charge down into the architect's heart. What he saw there would have killed a lesser man. Library of suffering, every war, every failure, every extinction, all archived, all stored, and all of it studied. He saw humanity's entire history reduced to patterns, numbers, simulations. He saw his own life played out in 36 variations, all ending in death, all deemed productive outcomes. He saw Merrick, he saw his wife, he saw his son, all looped, all dissected. He screamed and fired. The architects tried to stop him. They threw visions, illusions, mirror worlds. But it wasn't enough, because Roden wasn't trying to survive, he was trying to destroy, and vengeance is the only fuel that never runs out. He reached the core, a pulsating mass of thought and code stretched across dimensions. He jammed the spike into its heart, a weapon made from stolen architect bone and human emotion. It pulsed, paused. We made you to end war, you made us to lose. We made you to inspire, you made us to bleed, and you did. Roden pressed the trigger. Now so will we. The detonation wasn't a boom, it was a scream across the stars. Every frame shattered, every echo collapsed Across the galaxy, architect signals. Stuttered then fell silent, ships. Floated dead and void, the simulations. Stopped, the experiment was over. Back. Aboard the Maverick, what was left of. The Legion gathered, Traz was gone, Vex was gone. Beck vanished in the last breach, Harrow stood beside Rorden, face bruised, eyes bloodshot but alive. It's done. Harrow said, they're gone. No. Warden whispered, they're just quiet. What now? Warden looked at the stars. They made us to burn, he turned. Let's give them fire. Years later, no one remembered the names of planets or governments or empires. They remembered the Legion. They remembered the Maverick. They remembered the war. Humanity refused to lose, and in every quiet corner of space, when tyrants rose, or monsters whispered behind neural nets, a single phrase echoed from system to system: do not provoke the broken. Because the last time someone did, they turned gods into ash and carved a new galaxy from the ruins.